Welcome back to another episode of Talk About Games, where today we're going to be taking a look at a handful of different games because we're actually be talking about PlayStation's trophy system. Trophies are collectibles that can be obtained from doing different challenges within games. They were first implemented in the second half of 2008, with a game called Super Stardust HD being the first game to have them. It wouldn't be until January 1st, 2009 that all future game releases would be required to have trophy lists attached to them. It wasn't required for games before this date to patch a trophy list in, however, some developers did choose to. The most notable by popular demand was Metal Gear Solid 4 getting a trophy list sometime in 2012, 4 years after the game's initial release. Now, trophies have always been on my radar, but I've never really been the type of gamer to go out of my way to go for trophies, or that elusive platinum trophy that you get for getting all the other trophies in the game. However, sometimes I do really enjoy games, and I find that just by playing them, I end up with a bunch of trophies anyway, and I may as well just clean up the rest of them. And that's what we're going to be talking about today. I'm going to be going through each of the platinum trophies that I've acquired, and talking about which trophy was the hardest to get for that game. So without further ado, let's get on to the video. The first game we're going to take a look at is Dark Souls 3. Yeah, this is the first game I ever decided to get a platinum trophy for, and honestly, it wasn't even all that bad. With a 4.4% platinum completion, the biggest roadblock in platinuming any Dark Souls game is just patience, really. You'll get there eventually if you just take your time and do your best not to get frustrated. In saying that, the hardest trophy for this game is a tie between two separate trophies. The Master of Miracles trophy, which is awarded for obtaining all miracles in the game, and the Master of Rings trophy, which is awarded for collecting all the rings in the game. The reason the Master of Miracles trophy was so hard is because two of those miracles are locked behind getting to the highest rank of two different covenants. The easier of the two is collecting 30 Sunlight medals to get to rank 2 of the Warriors of Sunlight Covenant to obtain the Great Lightning Spear. This one really just requires you to do a lot of multiplayer while in the Covenant, as you'll be rewarded with Sunlight medals for being summoned into another player's world and helping them defeat the boss. However, the harder of these two miracles is getting to rank 2 of the Blades of the Dark Moon Covenant to obtain the Dark Moon Blade. Similar to Sunlight medals, you can obtain 30 Proof of Concord kept for being summoned into another person's world and assisting them. However, this person has to be getting invaded by another player. There are a lot of factors being put into play that make this one a little more annoying. Luckily, however, you can grind out this item from Silver Knights on the doorstep of Anne Orlando, but strap yourself in because these items only have a 3.3% chance of dropping upon killing an enemy. But if you decide to get your discovery up to 500 by using items such as the Gold Serpent Ring, the Symbol of Avarice, and the Crystal Sage's Rapier, you can increase that pitiful percentage up to a staggering 5.75% drop rate. It took me just under an hour to get 1 Proof of Concord kept for this video, and just keep in mind that you need to get 30 of them. So yeah, no matter how you get the items for this miracle, it's just going to be a pain in the ass, honestly. The other trophy I was talking about, the Master of Rings trophy, isn't really all that hard to get, it just takes a lot of time. You aren't only required to get every ring in the game, but every ring up to New Game Plus Plus, as there are upgraded versions of these rings that spawn in subsequent playthroughs. This isn't that bad, but wouldn't you know it, one of those rings happens to be locked behind rank 2 of a Covenant. That's 3 items needed now for trophies that require you to get 30 of a particular item. This one isn't as bad as the Proof of Concord kept, however, I found. You can mostly get these just from doing invasions in certain spots while in a particular Covenant, and it only took me about 15 minutes compared to the hour to get them to drop from the enemies. But you still need to get 30 of them, and the time it takes to drop will fluctuate. So those are the trophies I had the most trouble with during my playthrough of Dark Souls 3. Let's move on to the next game. Final Fantasy 15 is a big game, and looking back on it now, I don't know if it's even really a good game. I'm sure I enjoyed my time playing it, or I wouldn't have gone for the platinum at all, but the combat is kinda lacking, honestly. It can get kinda boring, but this isn't a review of the game, we're talking trophies here. Final Fantasy 15 has a 7% platinum completion, and the hardest trophy for me to earn was the Tortoise Toppler trophy. And for the record, this trophy isn't actually that hard to get, it's just incredibly tedious and can take hours to obtain. Tortoise Toppler requires you to defeat the Adamantoise, a large turtle causing earthquakes in the area. The reason this takes so long is because the Adamantoise has a high defense with about 5.5 million HP. Nowadays, apparently you can just use the Ring of Lusai, which got a huge buff in a patch, and kill the Adamantoise in about 20 minutes. But I didn't have that option back then, so that kinda sucks. When I did it, it took about 3.5 hours, so that's a bit of a difference. Anyways, that was probably the most difficult trophy due to tedium more than anything else. Undertale is a game I've always tried to steer clear about talking about. I love Undertale. I think the story's great, I think the characters are great, everything about the game is amazing, but the community for this game kinda sucks. It's one of the worst I've seen, so for the record, I think Undertale's great, and this is probably the last time I'm ever going to talk about it. With a 20.4% platinum completion, getting all the trophies for Undertale isn't actually all that hard. You don't even get a trophy for completing the game, as the last campaign trophy you get is to get to the second save point in the core. There is no trophy for defeating Asgore, or Flowey, or doing the True Pacifist run, or the Genocide run. Instead, there's a bunch of joke trophies, like collect 1 item, collect 2 items, 3, 4. There are 15 trophies dedicated to the Dog Shrine. And that's just tedious because you can only give 1 coin at a time, having to go through all the text each time for a total of 350 coins for all 15 trophies. Now, I know that the trophy list was intended to be a joke, so I'm really not all that mad about that. However, doing the Dog Shrine stuff was probably the hardest trophy for me to get, just because of the tedium of having to do it 1 coin at a time. Killing Floor 2 has a 1.6% platinum completion, and I feel the reason for that is the same reason it took me so long to do it as well. The Hell on Earth trophy requires you to complete a round on the Hell on Earth difficulty, and anybody who's played this game knows that Hell on Earth is fucking brutal. And I'm not particularly proud of it, but I did manage to use an exploit to obtain this trophy about a month before it was patched out of the game. Again, it's not something I'm really happy that I did, and maybe someday I'll beat around on Hell on Earth, but honestly that probably isn't going to happen. And that was the hardest trophy for me to get in Killing Floor 2, which I kind of cheated to get, so I guess that didn't really pan out the way I wanted it to. Anyway, moving on. Minecraft apparently only has a 1% platinum completion, which honestly I find a little surprising. I mean, the platinum for this game isn't that bad, but maybe it's because you need to defeat the Ender Dragon for one of those trophies, and a large majority of people playing the game may not even know that there's an endgame to Minecraft. Regardless though, this one has a couple trophies I had trouble with, the first one being the Lion Hunter trophy, which requires you to tame an ocelot in order to obtain. The reason I had so much trouble with this one is because I just don't really see ocelots all that much. Even playing today, I really don't see them anywhere. The second trophy I had trouble with was the Sniper Duel trophy, which requires you to defeat a skeleton with a bow from 50 meters away, and for those who don't know, 1 block is about a meter. So in order to do this, I ended up just trapping a skeleton in an enclosure and going 50 blocks out and shooting it until it was dead. This one took a while to find a good way to get it, but I did get it eventually. Right, Senran Kagura, yep, the anime titty game. Yeah, I have the platinum for this, and you know what? I'm not ashamed of that. I actually think this game's pretty fun. It's like a watered-down version of Dynasty Warriors, just, you know, with anime titties. With a 15.4% platinum completion, there were a few trophies that gave me trouble in this game. There are 2 trophies for getting a character's yin and yang meters to the max respectively. To do this, you have to play the game's 2 different modes to gain experience for those styles. This one just takes doing levels over and over again to get the experience for it. The other trophy I had trouble getting was the Flawless trophy, which requires you to get one of your characters to level 50. Now, this isn't that hard to do. You can get growth remedies in order to level up your characters, I hear you saying. But I didn't know that at the time. There is a trophy for getting 300 growth remedies, but not a trophy for actually using them. So I had no idea you could actually use those items to level up your character. It wasn't until about level 45 that I realized that was an option, so what made this one a little harder was just having to do levels over and over again to gain experience. In the end, the platinum for this one really isn't that hard, it just took a little bit of time. Next up, we've got Recon Wildlands. Love this game, it was a great game, it was much better than Breakpoint was. With only a 1.6% platinum rate, this one commands a lot of time to obtain all the trophies. The hardest trophy for me were the Cluster Bomber and a Better Mousetrap trophies. These required you to hit 7 enemies with a single C4 and a single mine respectively. These were a chore to get. I didn't even properly simulate the footage I'm showing you, that's how annoying I found it. Then there was the Only the Best trophy. This one wasn't that hard to get, just a little tedious. It requires you to purchase every upgrade for your character. Basically, you're just chasing down trucks with whatever resource you need required to level up your next skill. It takes forever and it gets real boring. Not hard, just kinda long. Marvel's SpiderMan only has an 8.9% platinum completion, and honestly that kinda blows me away. This wasn't a hard platinum to get at all, in fact I got it within 3 days of buying the game. All you really have to do is just complete everything on the map and you'll get it. You don't even have to do the section of the game that wants you to take photos of all the different landmarks around the city. So really there was no hard trophy for this game. However, it was a fun time, so I would totally recommend it as it's a pretty easy one to get. Next up, we have the remastered Borderlands Game of the Year edition. Just 6.2% platinum completion for this one, which is pretty surprising, honestly. I'm going to be showing footage for Borderlands 2 because I don't have the first game anymore, unfortunately, which is a shame because it's actually my favorite one of the 4. This platinum really wasn't all that hard to get, and the only real challenge I had was the Ding Champion trophy, which just requires you to get a character to level 50. I pretty much had to go through 2 whole playthroughs and part of the DLC before I got to level 50. Really, I just ended up with this platinum because I was playing the game anyway. Accounting Plus is a VR game, probably the only VR game that I have a platinum trophy for. It's a good game. With an 11.4% platinum completion, the hardest trophy for me was the Joe Fingergold achievement. You have to wait for this group of thugs to go through this lengthy conversation until they tell you to throw a brick through a window. But it's not just the gang. The brick itself has a conversation with you too, and you have to throw the brick through the window at the correct moment during that dialogue. Really, it's just waiting, and I'm starting to see a pattern with a lot of these trophies, honestly, but that was the hardest trophy for me to get for Accounting Plus. With just a 7.7% platinum completion, I was going to get the platinum trophy for the original Dark Souls eventually. It's no secret that it's my favorite game in the series, and I've got the platinum for Dark Souls 3, can't exclude this one. In saying that, however, this one was a lot harder to get than Dark Souls 3 for a single reason. The Knight's Honor trophy requires you to get all rare weapons in the game, and that doesn't sound too hard, right? What's considered a rare weapon anyways? The weapons combined with the boss souls? Well yeah, you do have to get all the boss soul weapons, which already requires at least 2.5 playthroughs, seeing as Sif has 3 different items to acquire, but it's also so much more than that. You also need to collect special weapons dropped by enemies, random weapons and shields just laying about around the world. There's a lot more that you need to get just for this trophy. This isn't that hard to do, it's just a little time consuming, and some of these items have really low spawn rates. Because of that, it was the hardest trophy for me to get. Next up, we have Dark Souls 2. With a 4.1% platinum completion, Dark Souls 2 understandably has the lowest completion rate of the 3. And note that I said Dark Souls 2 and not Scholars of the First Sin. For the record, I actually quite enjoy Dark Souls 2, but I hate Scholars of the First Sin. Random enemy placement, more challenging, and definitely not unfair gameplay. Because of this, I was playing the PS3 original of the game to round off the platinum trophies for the Dark Souls trilogy. Also because of this though, the Master of Pyromancy trophy becomes the hardest one to get. Similar to Dark Souls 3, this requires you to get to level 3 of the Brotherhood of Blood Covenant to acquire the Great Chaos Fireball Pyromancy. Now, for those of you who don't know, the Brotherhood of Blood Covenant is a PvP covenant, and not just invading people PvP, but structured duels against other players with a ranking system. And when nobody's playing a game anymore, you can't really rank up in a covenant. Luckily for us, however, there is an alternative. You can actually buy the Great Chaos Fireball from Chancellor Welliger in Drangleic Castle in New Game++, so once again, about 2.5 playthroughs just for one item. It's actually possible to get the Platinum Trophy for Dark Souls 2 in just one playthrough if you could do those Covenant requirements. The servers still exist, I'm pretty sure, so maybe if you had 2 copies of the game, you could just cheat and do it yourself. I mean, that works, right? Anyways, because I had to get to New Game++, this was definitely the hardest trophy for Dark Souls 2. Brew Legend has a 1.4% platinum completion, and I completely understand why. While the PS3 combined both original and DLC trophies into one list, luckily you don't have to get those DLC trophies for the platinum. However, there is one trophy that's a plague on this list, and it's likely the reason the completion rate is so low. That's the 6 Degrees of Schaefer trophy. Now, I use the word plague to describe this trophy because that's exactly what it is. For those who don't know, Brew Legend is an open-world action hack-and-slash RTS kinda hybrid game. It's got a lot going on, and those RTS segments were used for the game's multiplayer, and it's a great time. There's a lot of strategy that goes into commanding your factions. However, what can never be strategized is getting this trophy, as it requires you to play against someone who already has the trophy. When the game first released, the dev team would play online matches with people to get this trophy out into the wild, and just like the plague, it would slowly spread, infesting all who played the game online. But that was back in 2009. Trying to get this trophy in 2019 when the servers of a game that apparently no one really liked in the first place are barren, the real difficulty of this trophy was the 6 months that it took for me to find somebody who had the trophy and was also willing to help me get it. So they're the true MVP when it comes to this platinum. So if anyone needs this damn trophy, just hit me up and I'd be more than happy to help you out. Because of this foul plague on the game, this was the hardest trophy to acquire. Like a lot of games on this list, getting the Platinum Trophy for Skyrim wasn't really all that hard to do. With a 3% Platinum completion, there's just a lot to do in the game. For whatever reason, the last trophy that I got was the one for reading 50 skill books, and I don't know why that is, it's just kind of what happened. But I suppose if I had to choose a hardest trophy for this one that isn't just me getting impatient and quitting the game, it would simply have to be for getting level 50 with a character. Why do so many developers consider level 50 to be this huge milestone? Anyway, Skyrim wasn't that bad, just long. With a 5.9% platinum completion, Bloodborne is one hell of a game. I honestly didn't even expect to get the platinum trophy for this one. It's no secret that I've never been a huge fan of Bloodborne. However, a friend and I started playing through the game a little while ago, and something just kind of clicked that wasn't there before, so I got wrapped up in the game. So wrapped up, in fact, that I aimed for that platinum trophy and I didn't look back. And most of this game is just defeating bosses and getting to secret areas, collecting all the hunter tools, that sort of thing. But one boss above all other is so tedious and so grueling to get to, which is why the Yharnam Pthumerian Queen trophy was the hardest for me to get. The Pthumerian Queen requires you to do these things called Chalice Dungeons. She's the final boss after completing the 5th dungeon of the Pthumerian set of chalices. However, you need to complete a minimum of 7 very specific dungeons and get very specific materials, one of which is actually in the main game and not part of a chalice dungeon, in order to get to her. Because of this, the long trek to the Queen was the only tedious trophy I've acquired that I actually felt was rewarding. And that brings us to our final game for this episode, which was supposed to be Bloodborne. However, before I finished putting all the footage together, I actually managed to clear another platinum list. At just 0.2% platinum completion, Steep is the hardest platinum trophy I've accomplished, at least according to the player completion. The hardest trophy for me personally to get in Steep was the 24 karat gold Challenger trophy. This trophy requires you get 115 gold medals on the challenges in the Alps map, being the map that initially launched with the game. The snowboarding challenges were easy. The skiing challenges were also easy. The wingsuit challenges, super easy. The reason that this was the hardest trophy for me to obtain were those damn paragliding challenges because I'm just so bad at them. Therefore, they're the worst part of the game, and the game's terrible because the developers decided to put them in. And I'm just kidding, obviously, but they are, for me at least, the hardest challenges in the game, and those are why the gold trophy were the hardest ones for me to get. And those are all the platinum trophies I have since I started back in 2016, and the trophies that, personally at least, I found to be the hardest for each. Honestly, I think the trophies are pretty great. A little bit of an extra challenge for people who really want to push themselves and get a little more content from games that they're enjoying, even if looking back on them now, it is kind of a lot of busy work for most of them. And that's really everything I had to talk about for trophies, so hopefully everyone enjoyed this video, and hey, let me know what platinum trophies you've gotten, or what trophies you're proud of in general. So hopefully I'll see everybody next time, but until then.